Salam everyone and welcome back to SomaliDispatch.com. Somaliland is scheduled to hold its seventh elections in just a couple of days, May 31st, 2021 to be exact. These are going to be a joint local and parliamentary elections to be held in the country for the first time. As such, would present a set of challenges and expectations both internationally and domestically. To discuss those and other election-related issues, we've reached out to Guleid Ahmed Jama, a PhD candidate, a former chair of Human Rights Center in Somaliland, and also a prominent Somaliland human rights activist. Salam
Right.
and welcome back to SomaliDispatch.com, Guleid Ahmed Jama. Can you please start us up by telling us a little bit about this latest circle of elections and how they're different from the previous ones in Somaliland?
Thank you, and I appreciate for having me in Somaliland Spark.com. This is not the first time Somaliland will be having elections in post-1991 Somaliland, because in 2001, when the Somaliland Constitution was approved in national referendum, Somaliland embarked a process of democratization and holding elections for the key offices and houses. And that has started in 2002 when the first local council elections was conducted in Somaliland. Since then, number of elections were held. Of course, delays and extensions of them were setbacks. This time, this month, 31st, Somalilanders will be voting for in concurrent elections. Each voter will be able to vote for a member of the district council and also a member of the House of Representatives. So for this almost two elections happening in one day. That's new to Somaliland. It's the first time such systems held in Somaliland. Therefore, it's also a test if Somaliland could do such concurrent elections, and it might have impact on the future elections, how they are handled if this works well.
Right. So let's maybe talk about and start about voter registration. What improvements have been made in terms of securing the registers lists, if you will, and could more have been done in registering perhaps more people?
Yes, in 2008, 2009, Somaliland had a voter registration which didn't work well. Therefore, in 2016, Somaliland conducted voter registration exercise, which was based on iris recognition, the method of biometric identification. Therefore, it's very advanced complex voter registration system, which is not done in many parts of the world. Therefore, it was successful. Therefore, in this year and last year, the people who were not able to register in 2016 were given an opportunity to register, but also the people who become older and become eligible in terms age-wise to register. Therefore, it's a very sophisticated, highly advanced technology that is based on biometric identification.
Right. We know there's back and forth on the exact number of voters on the lists, but given the country's population versus the registered voters list, was there an opportunity perhaps missed or that could have had more citizens voting?
Unfortunately, we don't know the exact population of Somaliland. Census was never done. There are estimates. I'm not sure how accurate they are. In this year, the overall registered population voted for voting is over 1 million. I don't really know the percentage of that in comparison to the overall population. But what we might know is that in the people who live in rural and nomadic areas, it is difficult for them always to register to vote. The nature of their life is not compatible with the registration of voting system in Somaliland. Therefore, that's something I think we need to reassess in the future, because as you know, the voting and registration are based on permanent place. Therefore, you register in one place and you vote on that place. That is not possible for the nomadic community. They are never, there for such long period. They are here, then they leave in search of grass and water. Therefore, I think that's the shortcoming, but I think it's something that can be improved in the near future.
What about participation levels in the volatile eastern regions of the country, um, specifically Senag, I think eastern Senag, and parts of Seoul?
I think it differs. If you see Seoul, it seems that the voters people registered to vote increased dramatically, particularly in last annual district. Therefore, many more people are registered this year if you compare to previous elections. But that's not the case in Eastern Senat and Bukhod. It seems that many progress hasn't been made in these two places, in Eastern Senat and in Bukhod districts. But when it comes to Seoul, particularly last annual, the number of registered voters have dramatically increased.
Right. There's also lots of discussion revolving around quotas for women and minority communities. Um, it seems to be on the numbers of candidates that parties brought forward. The numbers are not sufficient, as they, if you will. What are some of the challenges? What could have been done more to get more candidates from those communities involved?
Yeah, unfortunately, the parliament did not approve the quota. They rejected it the second time. And the civil society and activists put a lot of faith with the parliament. That didn't work in the last minute. And I think the activism, the movement towards gender inclusion was not a strategic. You know, the majority of the efforts were based on the quota. Therefore, alternative policies and strategies were not in place. Therefore, when the parliament said no, almost nothing was ready to do anything else. Therefore, the number of women who were able to register to be in the list of candidature are, I think, less than 30 in the entire country. That means the number of women in the parliament will be 0 or will be 1 or 2. Realistically, if you look mathematically, the number of women running for offices and the overall men who are running for offices, therefore, that's very unfortunate. It seems the gender inequality in the House and in the local councils will exist, and that is a problem to Somaliland because it is one of the weaknesses of our process. Women are not part of it, and minority communities as well. Although some voluntary quota were succeeded when it comes to minority communities. Parties agreed on that, and I hope that might yield good results.
Yeah, much. Thank you, Guleid, for that explanation. And much have also been said about the way in which candidates are selected. One of the criticism being the selection of candidates were not as democratic as the elections suggest. What shortcomings, and I know you've spoken to this extensively in other interviews and papers and articles that you've written, isn't it counter-democratic the way the candidates are selected?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think it's something Somaliland has to have a dialogue if we want to improve our democratic process. The political parties almost delegated candidate selection to clan leaders. Therefore, it was all the clan leaders who were selected. And, that is not transparent. That's not based on at least written rules, and that marginalizes women, minority, and largely also sort of people who are not associated with clan dynamics. And it was not entirely undemocratic, but I think it was rules that do not favor all. It was unequal or uneven platform, so to say. And I think most of the blame goes to the political parties, the three political parties. I think the clan leaders were asked to do a task that they have never done, and they were trying to do their best. But it's the political parties who failed to respect their own code of conduct, the rules and the laws of the country. It is not the clan who should select the candidate; it's the party who should select through democratic process. And then the party has to present someone who believes in the manifesto of the policies of the party. And that's not what is happening now. It sort of created more division and polarization in the community. The platforms of the candidates are not asking votes from other people. They're asking votes from their own sub-clan. That's very divisive, and I think it might, in the future, increase nepotism and corruption.
Right. In terms of international exposure, given the magnitude and the significance of these elections, we understand the international community's involvement, limited maybe in terms of funding the elections in Somaliland, and the stream of international observers coming to the country, even today, meeting with the president. Do you think Somaliland's elections are getting enough notoriety outside of the country in the international arena? Does the world really see the significance of what it means to hold one person, one vote election in Somaliland?
Somaliland is holding an election in the Horn of Africa, a region that's not prominent of elections. It's a region in a number of dictators and insecurity. Therefore, if you look at that way, Somaliland is doing a remarkable job. A small and recognized country holding elections, it is a very fantastic job. And I think Somaliland is not getting the attention it should get from the international community and the media, particularly. But also, I think this year the number of international observers are very limited. And I think that's due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Movement of the bill was very limited as well. But I think the elections are significant locally more than internationally for a number of reasons. And I think that's why we need to celebrate, even if the world doesn't see us. The outgoing members of the House of Representatives were elected in 2005 in 5 years' time. They have stayed more than 10 years, extra 10 years. It's like every registered voter under the age of 32 has never voted for a member of the House of Representatives. And that's very, very undemocratic. And therefore, this is opportunity for the younger generation. It's opportunity for the people of Somaliland to send someone they like or they trust to the parliament. The same goes to the district councils, which should do important job. But people are not satisfied with the current mayors and the people who run districts. There is opportunity to try at least to do a new people to go there. But as you said, the way the world is structured, it is not helping Somaliland. And I think that's very unfair. The democracy and success and achievements of Somaliland are not properly rewarded.
Right. Finally, there are a lot of expectations placed in these local and parliamentary elections and candidates, whoever that might succeed and come out on top. What are the likelihood that these candidates would deliver on those expectations and promises, if you will?
If they don't deliver these expectations and promises, that will undermine the system. People try to unseat some leaders who failed them, and this is a hope for them. And if elected leaders, local councillors or members of the House don't do what they are expected, I think that will not be good for Somalia. That's why I urged them, first and foremost, I urge people to really vote on merit. I'm really disappointed of the level of clan-based voting in Somaliland. I think that might not be helpful. Therefore, if people vote on merit and we are able to put in place of position good people, women and men, we might have a better future. Because particularly, I think the districts are very important. In Hargeisa, if you look at the streets and the garbage and all of that, you'll be very shocked. You will not see this as the capital of the Republic of Somalia. Therefore, I would expect the people in Hargeisa to vote for people who will change that. Therefore, the expectations are high, but they are not that much high. People voted for president, they voted for local councils, and they didn't deliver. People know that these promises are not always kept. But we'll see what happens. I'm optimistic generally. I see civil society leaders, activists, journalists, people who really know the country who are seeking these offices.
I really appreciate you joining us and giving us your time and explaining what's happening in Somaliland currently, specifically relating to the elections and the big expectations and the hopes of the people there. Again, always much appreciated. I wish you all the luck and have a good night.
Thank you very much.